Well, welcome back everyone to our last session. Thank you, Trevor, for what you and Linda did in the previous one. I just felt like there was so much comfort being poured out for me, but I believe many others would have been sensing and feeling that as well. So thank you. So here we are, our last session. Trevor's enjoying the last session party. I'll raise my glass to you.
It's late, it's in the evening, so this is perfectly legitimate here.
And he did say to me a few minutes ago it was too early for me to start. Anyway, I just want to take a few moments just to thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you giving your time and being with us. We do hope that they've been these seminars have been a blessing to you. And I really just want to thank you for being part of this, and thank you for those of you who've made a donation. We really appreciate that. And of course, there's still an opportunity if you would like to do that. You can go to the website and do that.
Can I add my bit there?
Sure.
That is such an encouragement to us, because like everyone else, we're struggling on those issues. So thank you, everybody. Bless you.
Thank you. In a couple of days, I'll be sending an email to you all. That will give the YouTube links again. These video recordings will stay on YouTube, and those links will continue to work for you. So if you want to go back and watch them again, of course, you're very welcome. In that email, I'll also send you a copy of my ebook, A Father to You. And after Trevor speaking this morning, I just felt I'll also send you a copy of my booklet on comfort, which I trust will just
very good idea.
More of what Trevor was talking about, so you can go on receiving that. So they'll come by email in the next couple of days. I just want to mention a couple of our books. Trevor's already mentioned the book that he's on the way out and coming soon, but I want to mention Trevor's previous book. I was going to say it was his latest book, but with the new one coming, this is the previous one, The Story of Paul 2. And when you read the Acts of the Apostles, you get the chronological story of the journey. When you read Paul's letters, you get the detail of what happened in some of those places. And what Trevor's done in this book is he's taken the chronological story and he's superimposed onto that the detail from Paul's letters. And he's invented a character as well, which is, and to make it more of a story. And what's the word for it, Trevor? It's a
fictive historical narrative.
A fictive historical narrative. So,
which means it's kind of not fiction because it's based on history, truth. But I've used my little bit of dramatic license to make it a bit more readable.
And it is very, very readable. So I took it on holiday last summer, and I would really recommend this to you. So this is Trevor's previous book, and his new one is coming out soon. So I just want to recommend that. And I just want to also mention my latest book, which came out a year ago. It's called It Changes Everything. And what I do in this book is I describe what it is, this revelation of the Father, because more and more we're hearing about people talking about the Father heart of God and the Father's love. And for many people, that just means an encounter or an experience of inner healing. But for Trevor and myself and many other people, it's much, much more than that. It's actually walking in sonship. As Trevor was talking to us about yesterday, it's walking as Jesus walked. So in the first part of this book, I talk about what I see it being. And then in the second part of the book, I talk about what changes and how it changes when we start to live in love. So these two books are both available on Amazon, along with our other books. And feel free to purchase any or all of our books. They're available in paper format or Kindle format. So I just wanted to mention those.
We are so English, Mark and I, aren't we?
We are. We're terribly British.
Feel free. What we really mean to say is, please buy our books. It helps.
Thank you, Trevor.
There you go. We're learning, Mark, how to be not quite so English.
You're learning. So do go and buy those. And I just want to mention a couple of other things that are coming up. For those of you in the UK, on the 17th of April, we're doing an online Father Heart UK Family Day. Well, it's actually a family morning. And I'm doing that with Richard and Nia. It's a Saturday morning. And there'll be detail about that coming on the website in the next couple of days or so. And then the next series of seminars that I'm doing, I talked to Barry last night to arrange this. In April, Barry Adams and I are doing a series of seminars embracing a childlike heart. And again, I'll put that in an email to you in the next week or so. And they'll be on the same sort of registration process, be on the website shortly. So that's the notices, the news, the information. And so I've got the final session to do now, and then we'll join Trevor and Linda again on Zoom a little bit later. So
our news for our Aussie friends is we're really praying that we get to cross over in April and May to Australia. We're planning to start heading back to the UK about then, but we're hoping to be in Australia en route. If we go to Australia, we can't come back to New Zealand without quarantining again. But at the moment, Kiwis and folks like us, permanent residents, we don't have to quarantine on arrival in Australia, providing there is no outbreaks here. But we're believing and hoping and praying that we get to go over, and hopefully we'll see some of you face to face, which will be wonderful.
It be good, yes. So can I see you in a few minutes? Okay.
Yes, I shall shut up and drink the rest of my wine.
You enjoy your wine and cheese. So this is our final session, and I want to talk about carried by my father. Trevor mentioned in his talk about underneath of the everlasting arms, and that's something I just want to open up for us, something I think is just an important part of our journey into this revelation. It strikes me, having listened to Trevor talk about comfort, for us to be comforted, we have to be in a place of weakness. It's very difficult to comfort a strong person, because that human strength becomes like a barrier of self-sufficiency and not needing to reach out. But so I really want to talk about weakness, or being carried by our Father. Paul starts off his first letter to the Corinthians at the end of chapter 1, after his greetings. He says this in verse 26. He says, "Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly and despised things, the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." And Paul goes on to say, "I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom, as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness, with great fear and trembling." we often think of Paul as being the great man of God, the mighty apostle, the strong guy. After all, he could cope with being stoned numerous times. He could cope with shipwrecks. He could cope with persecution. And yet Paul describes himself many, many times as just a weak man. And he'd learned something about the power of weakness. When he watched Stephen being stoned as a young man, I think he was probably very strong, very sure of himself, very assertive, very clear in his purpose and his mission. And then, of course, he had that encounter with Jesus on the Damascus Road. And we read, and one of the things that Trevor draws out in his book is actually that the relatively long time frame before Paul starts his ministry. And we actually read that he was in a wilderness season for 14 years. And I think he went into that wilderness season as a strong, determined, self-opinionated person. And he comes out in this weakness. Because in that season, the Father has taken him on a journey, as the Father takes all of us on a journey. You see, our natural our natural posture and what we're kind of forced into through our education system, maybe through our families, maybe even through our churches, is we're forced into a mold of being strong, of being self-sufficient. And, the reality is very often we know we're not strong. We know we're not wise. And so we pretend and we create this facade of strength, and we create this facade of, I can do it in my own strength. I can do it in my own abilities. And of course, we all have abilities that are given to us by God. And we all have, giftings that are given to us. But they can become the dominant thing about our life. And here we have Paul saying, I came to you in weakness. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but a demonstration of God's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on him. And I think one of the things I've discovered on this journey is that God is not looking for the wise and strong. God is not looking for those who feel like they've got it all together. He sees through that pretense, but he is looking for a weakness and a dependency on him. And to get to that place of weakness and dependency on him, there's a stripping away that takes place. And I think we see that through Paul's life, but it's something that many of us will know, many of us will have experienced, but actually we don't really like the process of. We don't like the process of things being stripped away, because it can be painful. It can reveal the inner thoughts and the inner motives that drive us. But yet, Paul says, I've come to that place of weakness. And, the reality is, however strong or however wise we pretend to be, it's actually nothing compared to his greatness and his glory. And so I want to just simply raise a question with us this morning, today. How do you and I react to our circumstances? How do we react to the things that are going on in our lives, the pain, the woundings, the pressure points? We all face pressure points. And, we can let those circumstances rule us or govern us. We can try and overcome the challenges of life in our own strength, or we can rest in the one who's overcome. Jesus said in John 16, verse 33, he said, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. I think like never before we understand what that verse is all about. In this world you will have trouble. 18 months ago, I would never have believed in my lifetime I would be living through a global pandemic. I think when we saw it coming over the horizon a year ago, I was in Poland. When I went to Poland, there were, I think, 20 cases of the virus in the western part of the country. At the end of the week, at the end of the A school there, they'd closed the airports. Like the whole country was locked down, and we had to get the train into Germany to get a flight out from Berlin. And we kind of were thinking, this is not going to affect us. This is someone else's problem. And suddenly it affected the whole world. And we now know, in this world you will have trouble. And we know what that means. But Jesus says, take heart, for I have overcome the world. The wonderful thing is he has done what we are unable to do. He has overcome. We are not able to overcome. We know that. We've seen that so clearly, that circumstances and situations, we just cannot fight against them. And I'm not just talking again about the virus. I'm talking about all the other things that go on in our lives. We know that very often, however hard we try, we cannot overcome. But Jesus says, you're going to have trouble. That's not a very comforting statement. You're going to have trouble. But the comfort comes through the second part of it. He says, fear not, take heart. I've overcome the world. He has done for us what we are unable to do for ourselves. And so I simply ask this question, when trouble comes, when the storms of life come, where do you run? Where is your hiding place? Where's your safe place? Do you run into your own resources, your own strength, your own activity, your own performance? Or do you run into him? I've discovered the hard way that when I run into him, it's a safer, better place. I think for a long time I tried to run into my own resources. I tried to work things out. I tried to, persevere through, and I could do it. I could do it to an extent. I remember one time God said to me, he said, Mark, I'm going to bless you. I was so excited, God's going to bless me, yay! And then he said, but Mark, it will be limited to what you can do. And that is the reality. God blesses his children. God loves to bless his children. He just cannot stop pouring his blessing out on his children. And God said, Mark, I will bless what you do. I will bless all the things you do, but it will be limited to what you can do. And he will bless us. He will bless our own endeavors. He will bless our activity. He will bless our striving, but it will always be limited to what we can do, what we can achieve. And then he said to me, Mark, if you get out of the way and let me do it, you will see greater things. And I can honestly say that I've seen that happen. I've seen that be the case. That as I get out of the way and let him do things, I see greater things. Sure, there's still times I try and do it in my own strength. And then I remember, he'll bless me, but it will be limited to what I can do. But when I let him do it, I see great things happen. And that's just been the story of the last few years. And I'm learning to allow my weaknesses, I'm allowing those areas of weakness in my life to become a meeting place with the Father. Now, like Paul, he spent 14 years in a desert place. Very often, the Father takes us into a wilderness situation. You know, if we are going to go into a deep place with him, which I trust is the cry of our hearts, if we're going to go into that deep place, if we're going to have a deeper encounter with him, we will very often discover that that's in the wilderness, where we're alone, perhaps with our pain, we're alone with our wounds, but we're also alone with the Father. You see, if we run into a place of busyness or activity, we will easily miss the deep encounter of the Father working in our hearts. And you know, we think we can find a safe place in our busyness, in our activity, but actually the only true safe place is when we run into him. And that can often be that lonely desert place, that encounter with God. And that's when we run into our pain rather than running away from it. And I know from experience that it's not easy to do that, because like Jacob, we sometimes wrestle with God. You know, maybe we wrestle with him for justice. Maybe we wrestle with him for healing, physical healing, emotional healing. Maybe we wrestle with him for freedom. And very often it can be a painful wrestle, but it leads to a deeper awakening in our heart that will change us forever. And like Jacob, maybe the result of that encounter with the Father, that wrestling with him, it leads to us walking with a limp. I remember James Jordan saying one time, never trust someone who doesn't walk with a limp. Because when we walk with a limp, we're walking in a place of vulnerability. And that limp is a sign of a dependence on him and a depth in our lives that otherwise may not be there. It's an honest demonstration of weakness. It's not hidden, there's no pretense, it's authentic. It's in that place of surrender that we are moulded into his likeness. And to go through that journey, it is a journey of weakness. It's not a journey for the strong or those who feel they've got it together. It's a journey of those who recognize their own weakness. But like Jacob, you know, Jacob comes out of that wrestling in Genesis chapter 32. And he comes out of that night where he's wrestled with the Lord, and at the end of the night, the Lord touches his hip and disjoints it. And for the rest of his life, he walks with a limp. But he comes out of that encounter with these words. He says, I have seen God face to face. And when we go through those seasons, that can be our story too. We can come out and say, I've seen him face to face. And I know I'm not talking about something today that's easy, because it's not. It touches something deep in us. It touches that very depth and that vulnerability in us. But it's an encounter that transforms us, and we come out of it and we say, I've seen the Lord face to face. And you know, when you have an encounter with God face to face, you don't forget it. It changes us, and it leads us deeper into his presence. And sometimes there is no other way to experience the depth of his presence or to receive his blessing than to go through that wrestling encounter with him in the wilderness place. I remember my mum always used to say, after my dad died, she was left with 4 young children. And my mum would always say, and she says, at the end of the day, I had to close my bedroom door, and it was just me and God. And she said, I knew that I had to get my strength from him. And those encounters that we have with the Lord like that, they take us deeper and deeper into his presence. In Isaiah chapter 40, Isaiah writes, he says, "Do you not know, have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary. He increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." And, Isaiah is writing about a dependence that we can have on the Father. And that dependence on the Father, that recognition of our own weakness, of our own inadequacy, it throws us onto him. And it is that encounter we have with him when we are thrown on him that renews our strength. Yes, we all grow tired and weary. Not just the youths, all of us grow tired and weary. All of us stumble and fall. But Isaiah says we can put our hope in him, and that will renew our strength. It will enable us to soar on wings like eagles. You see, I've learned this, that our weakness, our recognition of our weakness, it leads to a renewal and a dependency on him. And we discover in that place of weakness that his greatness and his power comes underneath us, and it lifts us up. The world says strength is good and weakness is bad. Everything in the world, our political system, is strength is good, weakness is bad. You've got to get the upper hand. Our education system says strength is good, weakness is bad. And sadly, we see this attitude and atmosphere invading families, invading churches, that you've got to have it all together. You've got to look good. It's all about your strength. But actually, the world has got it upside down. Weakness is good, as we will see, and our own strength leads to a path of self-righteousness. What does Paul say? You see, Paul's letters, we just read at the beginning that something that Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 about coming in weakness. And right at the end of 2 Corinthians, Paul labours this point again. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 30, he says, "If I've got to boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness." And he said, I will boast about a man like that. I will not boast about myself except about my weaknesses. And if I choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. He said, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. And Paul's conclusion is, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. This is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardship, in persecutions. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul has got to a place where he can really just recognize his own brokenness, his own weakness, his own dependency on the Father. And he says here in his passage in 2 Corinthians 12 that he was, given a thorn in the flesh. It was a messenger from Satan to torment him. Now, everybody, just as everybody wants to know what Jesus wrote in the sand when he bent down to the woman who'd been caught in adultery, everybody wants to know what this thorn in the flesh is. And, lots of people have different ideas. But, the point I want to draw out of this is that this thorn in the flesh was a messenger from Satan. It was something that Satan put in him, whether it was in his body or in his emotions or whatever, but it was a messenger of Satan to torment him. But the amazing thing is, Paul turns this around, and instead of it being a messenger from Satan, it becomes the thing that Paul sees that enables him to see his weakness. It becomes something good. And Paul was able to embrace this thorn in the flesh and recognize that this thorn was the thing that was keeping him in the place of weakness and dependency. And he could become content with it so that the power of God could be seen in his life. And, I think very often many of us feel like we've got a thorn in the flesh as well, don't we? Sometimes we know what it is. Sometimes it may be another person, and we know very, very well what it is. And, sometimes we know what the thorn in our flesh is, and it gets us down. It takes us into a place of depression or despair or despondency, and it's constantly nagging away. It may be a physical illness, it may be a physical problem, it may be a mental health issue, but we know it drags us down, and we might even refer to it as, well, this is my thorn in the flesh. And I just want to ask us today, can we see our thorn in the flesh in the same way as Paul saw his thorn? What do we do with it? Do we try and fight it? Do we want to be free of it? Of course we want to be free of it. But Paul perhaps was never free from his thorn in the flesh. And maybe for some of us that might be the case for us. As much as we want to be free from us, we know it's still there. But can we be like Paul? Can we turn it round so that it's something that God uses, so that the power of God can be seen through that weakness in us? Can we embrace the thorn in our flesh as weakness? Because if we can, it will take the focus off us and our ministry, our strength and our productivity. And it will allow us, like it did for Paul, to rest in him. And he will become our resting place. Psalm 73 says this, "Whom have I in heaven but you? Nothing on earth I desire beside you. My flesh and my heart may fail." And don't we feel like that sometimes? That our strength has gone, we feel just weak. And the psalmist says, "But God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it's good to be near God. I've made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds." And I just want to invite us to come to that place today where week 2, where you and I can say, God is the strength of my heart. God is my portion forever. He is all I need. In this desperate situation, Trevor mentioned some of them earlier on, perhaps the countries that we're living in and the situations in our country, but it may not be like, it may just be the situations we're facing in our family. It may be with a family member. It may be with finances. It may be with job. It could be anything. It could be maybe our history, our family background, the things that are just pain and wounds in our heart. Can we allow that thorn in our flesh to be the thing that causes us to recognize our weakness and to come to a place where we can say, God is the strength of my heart. God is my portion forever. That in this place of weakness, I can see the power of God at work in my life. It's when we really come to understand that we've run out and we are empty, that we can begin to allow ourselves to be carried by our Father. I really believe that we all want to do things for God. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You know, God's done so much for us and we've given our lives to him and we really want to be just used by him and you know, I don't have a problem with that. You know, Ephesians 2 says that God has prepared good things in advance for us to do. And as I said before in these sessions, you know, I want us to find those things and I want us to do them with all of our heart and with all of our strength. See, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be used by God, but there's a problem. And that problem is that we can begin to think that God needs us. And we think of all the things we can do for him to help him along. And somehow our desire to serve him and our desire to please him, we can cross over into the gospel of good works. And we only end up in one place. We end up worn out. And I've discovered the hard way that it's actually very different. That God is not dependent on me, but I need to be dependent on him. In Deuteronomy chapter 1, Moses is telling the Israelites their story. He's telling them their journey. He's telling them their history. And the thing I love about this, when you read the first few verses of Deuteronomy chapter 1, these people are in rebellion. They're rebelling against God. They're doing their own thing. And Moses is frustrated with them and he wants to get hold of them and shake them. But he gets to verse 29 of chapter 1 and he says, this is what we read. He says, then I said to you, do not be terrified. Do not be afraid of them. He's talking about the Egyptians and the enemies. The Lord your God, who is going before you, he will fight for you, as he did in Egypt, before your very eyes and in the wilderness. There you saw how the Lord your God carried you as a father carries his son, all the way you went until you reached this place. You know, Moses is saying to these rebellious people, can't you see that it's been God who's been fighting for you. It's been God who's been making a way for you. And he will go on and make a way for you. Can't you see that he's carrying you like a father carries his son? You know, we want to take our backpack of burdens off our shoulders and we want to give our backpack to the Father and say, here you are, Father, here's my burdens. Will you carry my burdens? I've had enough of them. And you know, of course, he loves to take our burdens. It says in Peter, one of Peter's letters, cast your cares on him because he cares for you. And you know, we have a Father who wants to take our burden. Any father wants to relieve their children of burdens. You know, I look at my kids going through things and they're all grown up now and I look at them and I see them struggling and there's something in me that wants to do everything I can to help them. And sometimes I know I just have to let them discover their own journey. But any father wants to relieve the burden, take the burden off their kids. Of course they do. And we've got a Father who wants to take our burdens, but he wants to do something so much more. Yes, he wants to take your burdens, but he wants to carry you. He wants to reach down and pick you up in his arms and carry you as a father carries a son. He's gone before us. He's the one who fights for us. And Moses says to the people, can't you see that he's done this all the way? And I want to underline all. He carries us all the way. He carries us through the bad times, the difficult times, and he wants to carry us through the good times as well. And, my question to us today is, can we allow ourselves to be carried by our Father? At the end of Moses' life, he's blessing the people. And once again, in Deuteronomy 33, he reminds the people of the nature of the Father. And he says, there's no one like the God of Jeshurun who rides on the heavens to help you. He sits on the clouds in his majesty. The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are his everlasting arms. Again, in Isaiah chapter 40, it says, see, the sovereign Lord comes with power. He rules with a mighty arm. His reward is with him. His recompense accompanies him. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and he carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. See, both those passages in Deuteronomy and Isaiah, it's a picture of a strong, powerful, mighty God. He sits on the heavens. He rides in the clouds. There's this picture of strength and power. But there's also a picture of tenderness and comfort as he reaches down and picks us up and carries us. It's the father heart of God and the mother heart of God being put together. That he is strong. He is reliable, he is dependable, but he's tender and he's compassionate. And we have a big, strong, mighty God. But we also have a loving Father who wants to reach down and pick us up and carry us. We like to rely on our own strength rather than relying on his strength. And yet we see from these two passages that we can rely on him, we can depend on him to carry us. But who can be carried? It's a little child. My kids are grown up. They're all in their 20s and 30s now. I couldn't carry them if I tried. I wouldn't want to. They wouldn't let me. But I can reach down and I can pick my little grandsons up, and I can pick them up and I can carry them and hold them close to my heart. See, it's the little child that can be carried. And Jesus often said, the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. He took a little child and said, unless you change, unless you humble yourself, unless you become as a little child, you can never enter the kingdom of heaven. And that word change that Jesus uses in Matthew 18, the literal word is convert. Unless you completely turn around, it's like you're walking in this direction, he says, and you've got to stop walking in that direction, and you've got to be converted. You've got to be turned around and walk in this direction. You see, I think for us to become a little child, it's a serious conversion of our heart attitude, because everything in the world teaches us not to be childlike. It's to grow up, to be independent, to be strong, to get it all together. And Jesus says, no. If you want to enter the kingdom, you've got to convert. You've got to go through a conversion experience, which involves humbling yourself. We don't like that, do we? Particularly us men. We don't like to be humble. We don't like to humble ourselves. But Jesus says that's the only way, is for you to go through this conversion experience through humility and begin to walk in another direction. Jesus says in Matthew 11, At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. You've hidden these things from the wise and learned, and you've revealed them to little children. We spend our lives trying to become wise and learned. And Jesus said, the secrets of the kingdom are hidden from the wise and learned, and they're revealed to little children. Yes, Father, this is what you were pleased to do. This is your pleasure. And then Jesus says, no one knows the Son except the Father. No one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. And I think what Jesus is saying there is, I can reveal the Father to those who have a childlike heart. He's also saying, I can't reveal the Father to the wise and learned, because man's wisdom and man's learning is a barrier that prevents us seeing the Father. And Jesus says, I can reveal the Father to those who have a childlike heart. My question is, as we finish this series of seminars, is very simple in a way, but it can be quite difficult. You see, we called this series of seminars Encountering the Father's Love. And I know that's the desire of our heart. I know that's why you signed up to do these seminars. And I know you've signed up and you've given this time because you want to encounter the Father's love. You want to have a deep and a fresh and a new revelation with the Father loving you. You want to know that he is being a Father to you. And Jesus gives us the key here. The key is not to be wise and learned, but it's to have a childlike heart, recognizing our own weakness, recognizing our own dependency upon him, and saying, Father, in my own strength, I can do nothing. In my own ability, I can do nothing. I've tried really hard, but I know I can't do it in my own strength. Father, can I come to you as a little child and allow myself to be carried? You see, a father can't carry easily a teenager. Teenagers don't want to be carried. But a father can carry a little child. And we've seen in Isaiah, we've seen in Deuteronomy that this is the heart of the Father. We've seen Jesus saying, these things are hidden from the wise and learned. And Jesus goes on in Matthew chapter 11, he says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. He's offering us an easy yoke. See, Jesus says, take my yoke. He's encouraging us to take his yoke, that we take the yoke of Jesus upon us. And that yoke that Jesus was wearing was a yoke of relationship with the Father, where the Father does it all. And Jesus invites us to take that same place, that we are yoked to the Father. And we allow our Father to do all the work. It's a picture of the old ox ploughing the furrows and the young ox coming alongside and not doing anything apart from going along for the ride. And Jesus says, that's how I live with my Father. I let him do everything. I can do nothing except the things I see my Father see. I can say nothing except the words the Father gives me. My food is to do the will of him who sent me. Jesus lived in that yoke of dependency with the Father, and he invites us to step into that same yoke of dependency with the Father. Because when we live like that, we will find rest for our souls. And I believe it's the cry of the human heart for us to find rest for our souls. On Tuesday, I spoke about the restlessness inside of us. And here we have Jesus saying, I will give you rest for your souls. And we find that when we come to him, when we allow the Father to be revealed to us, and we live with a childlike heart, allowing ourselves to be carried. And so this encounter with the Father encountering the Father's love. The question, in one sense, is easy. Can you have a childlike heart? But sometimes the process is jolly difficult because we're so used to being wise and learned. We're so used to doing things in our own strength. We're so used to thinking we've got to have it all together. We're so used to our own self-righteousness and our own self-dependency. And Jesus says, can you humble yourself? And we go, yeah, well, maybe I want to, but I can't. And we see this simple question, can you have a childlike heart? And everything in us wants to say, yes, I want to, but we know how difficult it is to humble ourselves. Jack Winter used to say to people when he was praying for them, can you be a little boy who needs to be loved? And I think for me, sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I can say yes to that question, but I want to say yes. Do you know what? For me, that's good enough because it shows a heart that is willing to change. And so really my question as we finish this session is, do you want your own strength or do you want his power? Our weakness becomes the key to sonship, of his power being released in us. And it's also the key to a life of rest. And so the invitation is to come with a childlike heart and let your Father pick you up. Don't just give him the burdens of life, but allow him to carry you. And I want to say, as you do, you will see great things happen. So, Father, we just thank you for our time together. We thank you that you're loving us. Thank you that it's your heart to reach down and carry us. As a father carries a son, so you want to carry us. Underneath our lives are the everlasting arms. Father, may we be like Paul, that we can turn that thorn in the flesh around so it becomes a means for your power to be shown in our lives as we recognize our own weakness. Thank you, Father, that you bless what we do. You are a God who blesses what we do, but it will be limited to what we do, what we can do. And Father, as we get out of the way and let you carry us, we will begin to see amazing, wonderful things. Thank you, Father. Amen. I'm going to invite you to join us in the Zoom in just 2 or 3 minutes. Give me time to close this one down and open the Zoom up. Come and join Trevor and Linda and myself. We'll take questions, comments, but again, we just wanted this to be an opportunity of seeing the Father's blessing poured out on us. So we'll see you in a couple of minutes.